Tonight, border security at a moment of scrutiny. The RCMP, the arrests, and a deadly incident. How a police helicopter led to a takedown.
We have the partnerships, the technology, and the resources.
And Ottawa's next move on the looming economic threat. The White House tries to walk back a plan to take over Gaza.
It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort.
I was actually handcuffed, blindfolded, and then put in a cell.
Also, what the man known as Canadian Dave is saying about his 77 days as a Taliban prisoner. Plus, a new mother dead and a warning about a dangerous bug.
It baffles me that in 2025, a 29-year-old woman can die from an infection from childbirth.
And an unwanted connection. The tail end of how two planes had trouble on the tarmac.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. One man is dead and 15 people are in custody after a trio of recent interventions at the Canada-U.S. border in Alberta and Manitoba. The Mounties revealing dramatic new details today at a time when Donald Trump is hammering Canada to get tough on border security to avoid tariffs. Some of those crossings involving children on foot in sub-zero temperatures. CTV's Kathy Lee is in Calgary tonight. Kathy, what are we learning?
Omar, with border security under the lens, the RCMP press conference today highlighted its alertness and ability to respond to illegal activities.
A group of 6 individuals were heading towards the Manitoba border.
Officials released video of illegal migrants being intercepted along Canada's borders. Thermal images captured by an RCMP plane last month show 6 people crossing on foot being detained near a Manitoba border crossing. On Monday, 4 adults and 5 children were found crossing the Coutts border on foot carrying suitcases.
I think the key part of this is the humanity part of that as well. We have young children that are crossing, adults that are crossing in -30 weather, not counting the wind chill.
There was also a deadly incident yesterday morning at the Coutts Border Crossing. Mounties say the man was referred to secondary inspection, but instead of stopping, he kept driving. Police chased him and deployed a tire deflation device to stop the vehicle. The man then ran away and later died after shooting himself.
We have the partnerships, the technology, and the resources in place to respond to the border and stop illegal activity. By working closely with CBSA, as well as our provincial and U.S. law enforcement partners, we can detect and arrest those who attempt to cross the border.
No fentanyl was found in any of the cases, and RCMP confirmed that a Black Hawk helicopter was used in one of the investigations recently deployed in response to Trump's tariff threats. Omar.
All right, Kathy Lee in Calgary tonight. Kathy, thank you. Even as the focus remains on north-south trade between Canada and the U.S., there are renewed calls tonight to break down barriers when it comes to east-west trade between provinces. CTV's Michael Couture on the new accelerated timeline.
At a campaign stop east of Toronto, Doug Ford continued to make U.S. President Donald Trump the central issue of the Ontario election. While Ford praised the federal government's border plan to stave off tariffs, he raised a few issues on a virtual call with the Prime Minister and other premiers this morning.
Who is the czar when it comes to drugs overall, especially fentanyl? We have to break down the silos if it becomes to the RCMP or any other police services.
A senior government source tells CTV News work is underway to name the person who will coordinate all the logistics that go with tracking the deadly drug and its precursors. Canadian leaders also talked about facilitating interprovincial trade within 30 days.
So you're going to see these barriers coming down, and there is no need for legislation in order for that to happen.
With Trump's trade war still looming, 2 people who aspire to be prime minister rolled out policy planks today directed at Donald Trump's concerns. Pierre Poilievre says a conservative government will impose life sentences on anyone convicted of trafficking more than 40 milligrams of fentanyl.
This penalty that I propose is proportionate to the crime. If you kill dozens of people, you should go away for life.
While in Windsor, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney promised to address other irritants with the U.S., like hitting Canada's NATO spending target in 5 years. He also proposed diversifying trade so we're not so reliant on the U.S.
We should become the essential trading partners of countries that share our values, including the UK, the EU, and leaders in Asia.
That type of diversification is so critical that the Prime Minister announced a Canada-US economic summit this Friday. The goal is to strengthen trade with other countries in the face of American protectionism, something Trudeau discussed today in a call with his British counterpart. Omar.
All right, Mike, thank you. There is shock and disbelief around the world tonight after Donald Trump's surprising proposal to seize control of Gaza, transform it into a, quote, Riviera of the Middle East, and calling for the permanent relocation of more than 2 million Palestinians. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin on the fallout.
Overseeing the swearing in of his new Attorney General, President Donald Trump insists his plan to take over Gaza.
Everybody loves it, but this is just not the right time.
Turns out, not everyone loves the idea. The Arab world is incensed. From Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and European leaders, Trump's proposal set off global alarm bells.
Our country and our home is the Gaza Strip. It's part of Palestine.
Trump, who's long argued against foreign wars, did not rule out sending U.S. troops into Gaza, calling for the permanent resettlement of 2 million Palestinians and that Jordan and Egypt should take them in.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site.
But in the ruins of Gaza, the tens of thousands of Palestinians who've returned are already rebuilding. This woman says she doesn't care what Trump says. Her house destroyed, she has no roof, but she's staying.
Their removal is equivalent to their forced exile, permanent and forced exile, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
At home, the president faced mixed reviews.
I'm not supportive of having the American people pay to rebuild Gaza.
It was a surprising development, but I think it's one that we'll applaud.
Absolutely dumb, stupid, and illegal. We will not be occupying Gaza.
And the White House seemed to walk back some of Trump's comments.
But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort.
Donald Trump's proposal would scrap decades of Mideast policy and a future two-state solution as he continues to push the limits of his presidential power. Omar?
Joy Malbin in Washington. Trump's comments have also sparked feelings of anger and pain for Palestinians here. Here's CTV's Heather Wright.
Donald Trump's comments have been denounced, rejected, dismissed, but it doesn't make them any less frightening for Palestinians.
Listening to President Trump's words was deeply painful, shocking, disappointing.
Bashar al-Shawa is from Gaza and says he has lost dozens of family members in the past 16 months of fighting.
And rather than seeing a path to justice, we now hear Mr. President Trump openly discussing plans that would further displace my people from their land.
Many Palestinians say Trump's comments conjure memories of 1948, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled or fled their homes during the war with Israel. Ibrahim Mana was born in Gaza and has loved ones still living there.
My family member says, they would never leave Gaza. Never, even if it means their life.
Today, Global Affairs Minister Melanie Joly said Canada's long-standing position on Gaza has not changed, adding we support Palestinians' right to self-determination, including from being forcibly displaced from Gaza. Similar statements have been issued by other G7 countries. Experts say leaders are trying to condemn Trump's comments while treading lightly.
I fear that their willingness to push back on some of these more inane foreign policy pronouncements by the Trump administration will fall way down on the agenda for Canada or the European Union or for other countries.
Taking over Gaza is just the latest expansionist comment made by President Trump after saying similar things about Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. Now, whether this is a well-thought-out strategy or a negotiating tactic remains to be seen. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
The federal government is going back on a promise to stop advertising on Meta platforms in order to promote its temporary tax break. CTV's Rachel Aiello was first to break this story. Rachel, what can you tell us about how much the ad campaign is costing?
The Canadian government has ended its ban on advertising on Meta, spending up to $100,000 on its first campaign back on the platform. Since late January, Ottawa has been using Instagram and Facebook to promote the GST holiday. The policy reversal scraps a suspension that started in 2023, when Meta pulled news from its platforms. Meta did so in protest over the Online News Act, which sought compensation for media outlets. At the time, the Liberals called the tech giant irresponsible, but now say it's essential that Canadians receive credible information about government programs on the sites that they're frequenting. Defending the decision, a Privy Council spokesperson said spending ad dollars on a platform doesn't equal an endorsement, and that going forward, departments may opt to advertise on Meta. Canadian media advocates say they were shocked and disappointed by the government's flip-flop, and say the government should not be spending money on a platform that is getting rid of fact-checkers.
The government of Canada should be advertising in Canada on Canadian media rather than sending the dollars south to the US. Meta foments misinformation and disinformation, and the government should be advertising with trusted sources of news.
The government says it's still taking steps to ensure Canadians can spot disinformation on social media, pointing to new funding promised in response to the foreign interference inquiry, which called disinformation an existential threat. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
Saskatchewan RCMP say a quadruple homicide in a First Nations community may have been a targeted attack.
When the File Hills Police Service arrived at the residence, they located 4 individuals deceased inside and immediately determined the circumstances to be suspicious.
The bodies of 2 men and 2 women were discovered on the Carry the Kettle First Nation on Tuesday. A suspect was arrested early this morning after reports of a man pointing a gun at people in a neighboring First Nation. Police haven't determined if he is connected to the homicides. And investigators in the U.S. are examining another jarring airport incident, this one in Seattle. The wing of a taxiing Japan Airlines flight sliced into the tail of a parked Delta jet. No one was injured. It comes exactly 1 week after a catastrophic mid-air collision at Reagan National Airport and just days following Philadelphia's fatal plane crash. A former Canadian soldier who helped more than 100 people escape the Taliban before being captured himself is telling his story. CTV's Judy Trin spoke to the man known as Canadian Dave.
David Lavery returned to Afghanistan on Remembrance Day. His mission, to bring visas to 18 Afghans with Canadian ties and get them out. But he was arrested at Kabul airport.
Until I was actually handcuffed, blindfolded, and then put in a cell. That's when a lot of things changed right away. That's when you know your freedom is gone.
Nicknamed Canadian Dave. In 2021, when Afghanistan fell to the Taliban, he was on the walls of the airport searching for Canadians.
So this is all Canadians behind him?
To pull from the chaos. This time, while his wife searched for him, he was interrogated by the Taliban. They assumed he was a spy and threatened him with torture, then threw him into a basement cell.
And you could see human sweat, oil stain where somebody would be. His back and his head would be up against the wall.
After Lavery's arrest, his wife June Ping and son Brant immediately reached out to other Canadian veterans and alerted consular officials.
I can, first of all, assure you that the Canadian government is taking very, very seriously this situation.
The family spoke directly with Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. They were advised not to speak to media and worried that Lavery's past as a member of the Special Forces would put him at greater risk.
I have to thank, the Canadian government and the Qataris.
Canada, which does not have diplomatic ties with the Taliban, reached out to Qatari officials to negotiate for his release. 77 days later, on January 26, Lavery was put on a flight from Kabul to Doha.
I just ran for him. I just didn't finish. Just never leave me alone,
And she hit me like a vice grip, as bang, wouldn't let go. And it was very emotional.
Since 2010, the Laveries have operated a consulting company in Afghanistan to help foreigners navigate the murky and even dangerous politics of the country. Since the arrest, the family is now considering closing their office in Kabul. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
The world's 15 million Ismaili Muslims have a new spiritual leader. Prince Rahim Al Husseini has been named the new Aga Khan. The 53-year-old was designated as successor in his father's will, which was unsealed today. The late Aga Khan, Karim Al Husseini, died yesterday at the age of 88. Coming up.
How do you tell your 4-year-old girls that they're never going to see mom again? And they don't understand.
A family's grief and the warning behind a rare fatal infection. A warning tonight about a troubling infection on the rise in Canada that may have taken the life of a young mother. CTV's Adrian Gobriel with her family's message.
Cradling his infant son as one of his twin daughters watches on, William Evans is still coming to terms with the sudden void his family is now facing.
How do you tell your 4-year-old girls that they're never going to see mommy again?
On January 17th, 29-year-old Selena Klinger Evans began having contractions. She and her husband arrived here at this hospital in London, Ontario. Following a C-section, they welcomed the healthy arrival of a baby boy named Isaiah. 2 days later, the young mother died in hospital.
It baffles me that in 2025, a 29-year-old woman can die from an infection from childbirth.
Following the delivery, there were no signs that Klinger Evans was battling an infection.
We, laughed and hung out while she ate, and he was great, she was great, the twins were great, everybody was she didn't feel sick at all.
The rapid speed of her deterioration meant her parents and some of her 7 siblings didn't even have a chance to say goodbye.
By Saturday evening, it was not looking good. And then by Sunday morning, we get the news that she's gone.
The initial cause of death has been listed as Group A strep sepsis. In 2023, there were 4,600 cases of invasive Group A strep uncovered in Canada, a 40% increase from 2019. It's an infection that in rare cases can lead to death. It can also arise following a viral illness. Recent spikes in COVID-19 and RSV could in part be to blame.
It's probably causing sort of a perfect situation in which Group A strep post-viral infection can come in and cause disease as well.
There are conflicting reports that the 29-year-old may have been sick leading up to her delivery. Either way, her family wants Canadians to hear their story.
What will you share with your son, with your 2 daughters about their mom when they're older?
That she loved him, and that she was brilliant. She was beautiful inside and out. She was just perfect.
For now, any hope of clarity on this tragedy will have to wait. The family has been told it will be at least another 2 months before a coroner's report is completed. Omar.
What a heartbreaking story. Adrian Gobriel in London, Ontario tonight. Still ahead. Why transgender athletes are the target of a major sports shakeup. A fiery debate has reignited from Donald Trump's new executive order that bars transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. Here's CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin.
What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor?
Young girl athletes wearing team gear and medals got a close look at the latest executive order targeting transgender rights.
This is a big one, right?
This signature bans transgender athletes from women's sports.
If you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding.
U.S. President Donald Trump called it ending the war on women's sports. Advocates called it the latest of his attacks on transgender rights.
And it goes to a bigger picture of not just impacting sports, but really impacting and thinking about trying to legislate away the trans community.
The NCAA, representing nearly 510,000 college and university athletes, has said previously that it knows of less than 10 transgender athletes within its ranks.
Now you're going to go out and win those events, right?
Trump, though, pointed to examples, including 2 Paris Games Olympians he says were men competing in women's sports. He's pushing the International Olympic Committee to make changes for the Summer Games in Los Angeles in 2028.
America categorically rejects transgender lunacy. We want them to change everything having to do with the Olympics.
The White House has also said it would order Homeland Security to deny visas to transgender Olympic athletes. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Washington.
Still ahead.
It shaped me by allowing me to do what I'm most passionate about.
What competing at the Invictus Games means for a Canadian veteran. The countdown is on to the Invictus Games beginning this weekend in Whistler and Vancouver. Tonight we're hearing from a Canadian athlete and veteran on her painful journey to the competition. Here's CTV's Isabella Zavarisi.
Terry Seaman spent more than 2 decades in the Canadian military working as a medic and x-ray tech. Her role was to help soldiers heal.
For me, it shaped me by allowing me to do what I'm most passionate about, which is helping people in healthcare.
In 2020, she was deployed to Latvia for an ongoing NATO mission. And in 2012, was part of an operation to tackle drug trafficking in international waters.
We go down into areas to try and deter drug runners and stuff like that.
But in August, the 49-year-old faced a personal battle. Workplace injuries to her shoulder and back led to a medical discharge.
Physically, I can't do all the activities I really used to enjoy. So to me, it was really hard on my mental health because I kind of lost who I was by being able to do all of those activities and stuff. And so it just makes me feel like I wasn't worth it.
Trying to figure out who she is outside of her military identity hasn't been easy.
I tell people it's like moving away at 17 from your parents' home. You don't have that support as much anymore.
To fill that void, she tried out for the Invictus Games, where she'll be one of 500 sick or wounded service members and veterans competing in 11 sports in Whistler and Vancouver. Seaman has spent months training in wheelchair rugby, swimming, and cross-country skiing, and has found a new sense of community and purpose.
So it definitely has gotten me more confident to try new things, and that I am worth it and I am enough.
In a few days, she will compete for Team Canada, with the country cheering her on. Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News.
And on Friday, on the eve of the Invictus Games, we will be broadcasting live from Vancouver. Marella Fernandez is here tomorrow for all of us at CTV National News. Thanks for watching.